Talk elections now. Experts are calling for election credibility imposed on various countries. Now, this comes after a report revealed that election credibility has been under threat worldwide from disinformation and interference. This forms one of the focus at the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance as they celebrate the 30th anniversary this month by partnering with Sweden to convene one of the world's biggest gatherings of election authorities. The gathering also aims to discuss ways of confronting new threats of disinformation, election non-acceptance, and autocratic interference. Election commissioners and senior government officials from over 40 countries will meet today till Thursday, the 12th of June, to hold talks in the region. And for more on this, Senior Advisor Electoral Processes Africa and West Asia, Olufunto Akinduro joins me on the news. Good to have you join us. And let's begin with one of the most significant threats to integrity of elections in Africa. And why do you think this situation continues to linger?
Thanks very much for having me. Our report doesn't only focus on Africa, but it just shows the broad trends across the world. But I think Africa specifically, interestingly, we saw quite a number of trends in the past year, which has more to do with questions of institutional integrity of election management bodies, steps being taken, to erode their independence, and the institutional frameworks that allow them to work independently. The role of money in politics, unregulated money in politics, remains a very major one, and the role of disinformation, but quite interestingly, also the role of climatic conditions, climate change in our different elections. So we see outcomes like in Senegal, where the elections were impacted by issues around climate change. The role of technology and innovation is also a two-sided one. It's an opportunity. It's certainly there to make elections work, but the failure of technology systems as well has plagued quite a number of elections on the continent and made this another, sport for fear and distrust. So it's quite an interesting space in Africa. But that said, it's not only gloom and doom in Africa. 2024 actually saw interesting critical elections that speak a lot about the future of democracy in Africa. So for instance, the outcome of elections in countries like South Africa, Botswana, Mauritius, Senegal, Namibia, these are quite, they are milestone events in Africa's democratic trajectory, and we should actually commend and applaud some of those elections.
And it's great that this conversation is coming at a time where, Africa, especially some countries in Africa, are going through, conflict, violence, and all of that. But how do we ensure that elections in Africa and beyond Africa are foolproof in that not just anyone can tamper with the system?
I think the first part of it is really about setting the rules of the game, which is our legal frameworks. Because regardless of how much electoral management bodies try, they can only work within the frame that is provided for them by the law. Last year, one of the trends was also questions around reforms. Some reforms were undertaken in bad faith, to further restrict the space. So first and foremost is, how do we undertake electoral reforms? Are these reforms consultative? And do we have the space for citizens to have their voice? Are reforms continuing to be superficial, where we don't want to get to the bottom of things? For instance, countries hardly talk about electoral systems. The electoral system we have, is it the best for us? So you look at Nigeria, for instance, the first past the post system, the number of by-elections that INEC has to conduct because of, legislators that pass on and you have to fill the seats. Is that the most efficient? Let's look at Nigeria, being the worst on the continent when you talk about women's representation in parliament. Our electoral system is the best for that. But most countries undertake reforms that just try to touch on superficial issues without going down to talk about whether these reforms would actually promote democracy or just help us with the next election and not, be much forward-looking, futuristic looking. Yeah.
And some of the findings from that report as the cause for, lack of trust in the electoral system, especially disinformation, cyber attacks, and all of that. I want to take you back to what you mentioned about the role of technology, especially with the introduction of artificial intelligence at this time. Is there a possibility that AI cannot tamper with election results?
Did you say cannot or can? Which is it?
Go ahead.
No, you make a good point about, the emerging role of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of fear around it, but it's also a two-sided issue. First of all, there's the need for everyone to understand the whole scope and frame of the question of artificial intelligence. What is it? What is it not? How can we harness the opportunities provided by it? Because across the world, you have election management bodies that have been able to very strongly harness the opportunities provided by artificial intelligence. And then you have, regulatory frameworks that help election management bodies to put guardrails in place to address the negativities. So whether or not it can affect, outcomes or even the process itself, in terms of coloring the perceptions of the voter, these are very critical issues. There is a possibility of that, but artificial intelligence in and of itself, it's not 100% negative issue. It is whether we understand it well and we know how to harness the opportunities it provides to us in organizing elections.
Senior Advisor, Electoral Processes Africa and West Asia, Olufunto Akinduro. Thank you for talking to us at this time.
Thank you very much.